Well, I have the privilege of starting a new series on worship. Yeah, a lot of excitement in the room. I equally, though, am a little bit daunted by the task. And I wouldn't be honest to say with some trepidation. Why is that the case? Because this is such holy ground. When we talk about worship to the one who deserves it all, it's a big thing, no? I don't want this just to be some smart words and some eloquent phrases. I want this, Lord Jesus, by your Spirit, to be truth that will change us completely. Because worship changes things. And, over the next few weeks, we're going to devote some time to this. And I'm grateful for our wonderful worship pastor, Eduardo, who leads our worship ministry across our church and all of our sites. And I'm grateful for him for many things, not least his heart for Jesus and the challenge he is to people around him. He lives a life of worship. And we as a church are grateful for him. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to have Eduardo, our worship pastor, speak. We're going to have other guests, worship pastors, come to speak. We also have our Lissy Link, one of our worship leaders, who will be speaking. And over the next few weeks, we are going to unpack what worship really does mean and how we can walk in that. And while it's worth saying that this is a teaching series, I'd rather you look at this as an invitation from the Lord to go deeper with him. An invitation to deeper encounter, an invitation into an alignment with God's heart, an invitation into becoming a people who don't just sing songs, but carry worship in every part of their life. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at different aspects of worship. And let me just start by saying, why is this so important? Why have we decided to devote time? Well, a few reasons. Firstly, I think it's fair to say that we don't always understand what worship truly is. And that's true whether you've been a Christian for 30, 40, 50, 60 years or for 30, 40, 50, 60 days. And we need to understand why worship really matters and why it is really the core of our being. I mean, that's how fundamental worship is. It is our first priority. Secondly, I think it's worth saying that worship in our day and age, and it's fair to say in our entertainment-led culture, is presented oftentimes as something it isn't actually. It's presented as this glossy, performance-led, song-led experience. But that isn't worship. And thirdly, because let's be completely frank and honest with one another, it can be hard. Worship is hard. Any heart work is hard. Anything that involves the heart is hard. Anything that involves the flesh, to use that phrase, in other words, our whole being, is difficult. And that's why the Lord has led us in this moment, in this season, in the life of our church, to devote time to it. And so today, what I am going to do is provide an introduction. I'm going to lay some groundwork, a framework and a foundation for the following weeks. And I'm going to touch briefly on some core topics. And then the team over the next few weeks are going to unpack this in greater detail and layer in other aspects for us to look at and grow in. So what am I going to look at this morning? 3 things. Firstly, I want to look at what it means that we are the temple, a temple built for God. What does that mean? You may have heard that phrase. Secondly, I want to unpack a phrase which you are going to start hearing from us, which is this: priests first, shepherds second. Priests first, shepherds second. We're going to unpack what that means. And lastly, I want to talk about the importance of purity over perfection. Purity over perfection. So, with that, let's start on part 1. We are the temple built for his name. Have you heard that phrase before, that we're the temple of God? I think if you've been a Christian for any length of time, you've probably bumped into this, and you will eventually bump into it. And on the surface, I recognize that it seems a bit odd, doesn't it? How can we be a temple? I mean, after all, when we think of temples, we think of buildings and bricks and mortar and maybe warehouses or beautiful cathedrals. That, after all, surely is what we mean by the temple of God. So how does it work that we, humans, are the temple? And what's very important about this phrase is that it really does speak to the heart of what worship is. You see, worship isn't about what we do on Sundays in this building. That's not worship. Worship is something we are called to live out every day in our lives. That's what worship is. And I'd like to look at 1 Corinthians 3:16. Why don't we turn together? If you're online, it's going to be on your device in the room. It's going to be on the screen as well. And the Apostle Paul says this to the church in Corinth, and indeed he says it to us. Do you not know that you, that's you and me, are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you? That God's Spirit dwells in you. Now, who is Paul writing this to? Is he writing this to the church leaders only? You may participate. Is Paul writing this to the church leaders only? No. Is he writing this to the worship team? No. Paul is writing to a community of ordinary believers like you and like me. And to paraphrase Paul, he's saying, listen guys, you guys, the community of faith, we are now the temple where God dwells. That's what he's saying. He's saying, listen, right now, you are where God dwells. Now, this was revolutionary for the early church. Because in Jewish tradition, of course, the temple, the holy place was the holiest place. Like you wouldn't dare. In fact, there was different parts of the tabernacle, and you wouldn't want to go in the Holy of Holies. In fact, the priest could only go there once a year. And when the priest did go that once a year, they would tie a rope around his ankle lest he would fall down because of the presence of God, and they would have to drag him out. And so all of a sudden, Paul is saying here is that we've scrapped that. You're the temple. I mean, has Paul lost his mind? I mean, Paul, is this a heresy, Paul? How on earth can you say that the God of the universe dwells in man? What's Paul saying? He's saying this. In the new covenant that we are in, that Jesus came and inaugurated, the place where God dwells is no longer a building. It's in you and me. Why? Because through Jesus, the veil that was in that physical place was torn in two. And the Spirit of God now makes his home in us. How radical is that? You don't need to go to a special place to worship. I'm reminded of the story of Jesus and the woman at the well. He said there will come a time when people will worship in spirit and truth. In other words, they won't be seeking a physical location, because the woman had asked Jesus where they were to worship, to paraphrase. So, if that's true, and by the way it is, just in case you were confused, this has massive implications for us, doesn't it? I mean, if it is true, just think about it, that we are the temple of God and that he dwells in us, that has massive ramifications for how we live our lives and how we think about our relationship with him, doesn't it? I mean, and this is where, excuse me, I have had to get on my knees this week. I probably prayed and got on my knees more this week on this subject than writing the talk, because I had to deal with my own stuff. It's like, wow, I needed that reminder, Lord. Because we can so easily fall into the trap that there is something sacred and there's something secular, that that we can somehow put in boxes different experience and say, well, that's worship over there, and what I do over here isn't. I'm sure you're not like me, but because really what this means is that your body is sacred. Ouch. I mean, are you feeling the conviction of the Holy Spirit right now? Your body, what you do with it is sacred. What you watch, what you consume, what you say, where you go, all the things that you do, you are the temple of God. What Paul was saying here is massive. He's saying, let us not delineate between your life there and your life in the temple. He's saying there is no such separation. If this is true, and it is, this means that you can't box worship into a 30-minute segment on a Sunday morning and tick a box. Worship, done. If it's true, and it is, it means you can't confine worship into a time or space. It means something so radical. Who knows that the gospel of Jesus Christ is radical? It means that worship is all of our life, in every conversation, every decision, every act of service. It can be worship when it's done with a heart turned towards Him. Let's use an illustration to help with this. When you have friends or loved ones coming over, do you sit on your sofa and look around at your messy house? I'm sure you don't have a messy house, but we sometimes do. Not a reflection on my beautiful wife. Sorry? You're the tidy one. I'll own that. I'm fine. I'm sure you're not like me, but when someone's coming over, what do? You go, right, well, we should tidy up. Funny enough, we're in a situation, as you guys know, we're moving to Australia. Our house is on the market. And every time we have a set of viewings, what do? Tidy the house. I mean, the only benefit at the moment is our house is constantly clean and tidy at the moment, which is great. But you get it ready. And when people come, you want the place to be nice and maybe smell of baked bread and coffee. Maybe put a scented candle on, Make sure the toilet is clean. And when you've got a house full of kids, you want to be doing that. Why? Because you want to honor the person that's coming and you want them to feel comfortable and at home. Do we do that with our bodies for Jesus? Ouch, right? I mean, this is radical. Like, I bet at the start of the series, you were like, yeah, I can't wait to hear about worship. How are you feeling right now? Lock the doors. Just kidding. We hear this phrase, worship is not a song. And, I was reminded of Matt Redman's very famous song. When the music fades, when all is stripped away, I simply come. You're not looking for a song. I want to touch on something here in terms of the worship we had earlier, the sung worship that we had. Songs are an expression of a life of worship, right? That's not just worship. That is a form of expression of worship, as is poetry or art or whatever it may be. It's a reflection of a heart and a life that is dedicated to Him and saying, I'm all in, right? But you see, I think the church has to own this one and say we've probably done a bad job with worship because we segment our services into such categories that we say, right, now we're going to worship with 4 songs or whatever it is. And during the worship, I thought I want to walk around the auditorium and just pray and just see how people are worshiping. And we came to a moment in our sung worship segment where there was no there was no lyrics on the screen. And all of a sudden, the instruments were expressing worship. I mean, it says in the Psalms that we are to use instruments, right? And I found it interesting to see how people respond to that. Now, this is not me critiquing you. This is not me judging anyone. I just think it's an observation. And even me, I'll own this. There was a part of me which is like, are we going to sing a song then? Are we going to get some words up on the screen? Just admit that. Part of that is I love songs, but part of that actually is I get uncomfortable when I don't have the safety rope of lyrics on the screen. Because really, I think those songs are like they're platforms into expressing our own song to Him. I mean, it says in the Psalms we are to sing a new song unto the Lord. That doesn't mean we should wait until the songwriters come up with something new. It means that we are required to come with our own songs of expression to the Lord. It could be a one line, which is, I love you, Lord. But you see, if you're living a life of worship, it's easier to sing those songs. Because what happens in the secret place, right? And so I want to challenge all of us to say, when we are in those spaces where there's no lyrics, what are you thinking? Are you going, well, this is can we put the lyrics up, please? I want to sing a song. Or are we recognizing that this is an opportunity just to express our hearts? Because worship is not just a song. Are you hearing me? Like, what would it look like if next week we had no songs and we just had music playing and you had to sing your own song? Would you turn up? Let me just take the register, please. Just see who's here. This is an invitation for something deeper, but you're going to be challenged, because I am. I hope you don't mind being challenged. I mean, that's the work of the Spirit of God, is it not? I mean, if we're conformed to the likeness of Jesus' Son, hands up if you wanted to do that. Right, change is required. I mean, it means coming outside of our comfort zone. I loved it when Chido, we got such wonderful worship leaders, was just singing this refrain and just riffing with it. I could just see the delight on his face and just see the deepness of his relationship with the Lord just outpouring in that moment. And he was encouraging us to do the same. And maybe if you come from a traditional background where you expect 4 hymns and a book with I don't want to hear my heart. I'm not saying there's anything wrong necessarily with that. What I'm saying is that is not only worship. That we need to be open to expressing our hearts for Him in a new way, right? That there's more. There's more. There's more to experience. Oh, wow, look at the time. Wonderful. That was the first point, and most of that was not in my notes, so. Ask yourself at this point, what does your week look like? And I've had to pray about this. I'll be honest, my week has not been good. I'm not just because I've had a cold, but I just don't think my thought life has been that good this week. In front of everyone, and the cameras are on. I mean, I have not been impressed with myself. I've had to do a lot of Lord, forgive me. It's okay. His blood is sufficient. I just think it's interesting that I'm preaching on this and I've had a bad week. Funny that. But I've done the work of saying, Lord, would you reveal any iniquity in my heart, as the psalmist said. And I want to encourage you, if you want to go deeper in worship, then you need to be praying that prayer. If you're serious about moving towards the Lord and going deeper with Him, then we need to say, Lord God, how does my week reflect a life of worship to you? That moves on to the next part, which is priest first, shepherd second. And this is another phrase that we're going to be looking at over the course of these few weeks. And let's look at Matthew 22:36, because Jesus was asked a question, teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And typically, when a Pharisee or a scribe asked Jesus a question, they were trying to catch him out. But Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. We know that, right? And then he adds, and the second is like this, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, can you see there's an order here? What's first? Love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. What does that speak to? You are the temple of God. If you are to love him and worship him, you need to bring all of yourself. And so what Jesus is saying here, and this is not just about sequence only. It's not like you've got to say to yourself, I can't love you yet because I don't feel like I've sufficiently loved the Lord. To be fair, you'll never sufficiently love the Lord. But what it's saying here is in order to love others as yourself, in order to love yourself, then you need to love God first. And essentially what it's saying, Jesus is saying, is where you abide defines what fruit you bear. Where you abide defines the person you are. And what is true in the natural is true in the spiritual. I mean, a rose bush, its branches is going to bear roses because it's connected to a rose bush, right? Where you abide defines the fruit that you bear. And so, to put it another way, we're priests first, and then we're shepherds second. This means that we minister to the Lord before we minister for the Lord. We minister to the Lord before we minister for the Lord. And this is not something that the paid pastor does in ministry. This is all of us. We're all called to minister to one another. But before we do that, we are called to minister to him first. Excuse me. In Exodus 28, the priests wore garments, right? And they had the names of the tribes of Israel engraved on their shoulders and over their hearts. But their first job wasn't to carry the people, it was to stand before the Lord. And that is the posture that we take. Standing before the Lord, loving him, delighting in him, offering ourselves before we offer anything else. And if we flip the order, if we try to serve or lead or perform without first beholding and ministering to him, we risk burnout, comparison, even resentment. We operate for him out of a place of being with him. And that was another challenge for me this week. I was like, oh wow, yeah, I've gone on autopilot sometimes in certain areas. Like, this is a good reality check for us all. But when we start with love for God, everything else flows. And I know there's a witness in the room. You could attest to this. And so the question I think this presents to us is, am I ministering to the Lord in my daily life? What do I mean by minister? I mean, am I giving him my all? Am I seeking to please him? Am I worshiping him with my tithes and my offerings? Am I worshiping him with my time? Am I worshiping him with my thought life? Am I worshiping him with the way in which I put time aside for him? Am I ministering to him? And is my doing for him flowing out of being with him? And I think that's a massive, massive challenge in our culture, where we go a million miles an hour. The expectation levels for us from others is massive. I mean, I love WhatsApp, but I've got so many WhatsApp groups and messages. I'll be honest, I struggle sometimes to keep up, and I'm sorry if I owe you a reply on WhatsApp. I feel overwhelmed sometimes. I mean, but that is the culture that we are in, of just saturation. And sometimes we need to step out of that and say, I've got my order wrong. I need to abide with him. I need to be a priest first and a shepherd second. Now, I want to touch on an objection here to worship that I often hear. Maybe you've heard this, maybe you said it. Mark, what kind of God needs our worship all the time? Really? Isn't that a sadistic God? You heard that? And maybe you said that. You don't put your hand up. I just find that a bit odd that a God would be like that. I want to just approach that head on and say this. He doesn't need our worship, but he deserves it. He doesn't need it, but he deserves it. You know, the Apostle Paul said in Acts 17:28, we live and move and have our being in him. And the thing we need to recognize is that we have been created for worship. Like when I said at the start of this talk that worship is at the core of our being, I meant to say that worship is at the core of our being. Because we were created for worship. It's not that worship is an add-on to our lives. It's that worship is the center of our lives. There's a God-sized hole in our hearts that only God can fill. And we try our best to fill it with other things, don't we, sometimes? And the truth is, if you fail to worship God, we will worship something else. The question is not, will you worship God? The question is who are you worshiping? And really, when I'm talking about this series of worship, I'm not presenting you something new to do. I'm challenging you to say, where is your worship directed at the moment? Actually, because we have been created. I mean, look at celebrity culture to understand that people want to worship someone or something. He deserves our worship and we need it because we've been created. Let's end by looking at part 3. Are you with me? Great. Purity over perfection. I can't say I came up with this phrase. I think this is yours, Eduardo's. And let's look at what we mean by purity over perfection. And I think this speaks again, rather head on to the culture of this age we're focused on. Because we are in a culture of perfection. There's a photo filter for that. I like using Zoom now because it makes me look better than in the flesh. And I've got this little slider and I can decide how perfect I look. I won't ask you where your slider's set. But the pressure is to be perfect. I mean, look at these influencers and their perfect lives. And then they turn off the camera and they're like, oh, man, my life sucks. If you're an influencer, bless you. I know influencers in the room, by the way, who do a fantastic job and are bringing great content. So I'm not commenting on influencers per se. Hear my heart. But I feel the pressure to be perfect. I don't know about you. How's life doing for people? Well, mental health issues are skyrocketing. This drive for perfection. Is God looking for perfection? He's looking for this. Psalm 51:17. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. Romans 12:1. Offer your bodies as a what? Living sacrifice. Holy and pleasing to God. That is your true and proper worship. You see, these verses remind us that what God desires isn't performance or perfection. It isn't following rules out of obligation. It is offering ourselves in love, in humility, and in our brokenness. And offering our brokenness. He's looking for purity. What does purity mean? It means holiness. It means he's looking for lives that are set apart for him. He's not looking for perfection in that because there's only one that's perfect. And we are being conformed to his likeness. And the process of sanctification means that we are becoming more perfect. But until the time that we are with him in heaven, won't be perfect. If you're chasing perfection, well, you're never going to reach it. And, I think another thing I hear about worshiping people when they come into church and I'll speak to them, or I've had conversations during the week, say, I just haven't been able to worship God. All right, why is that? Well, I think I just need to sort myself out first, Or I have doubts, and I'm not minimizing that we all have doubts. Or I've sinned, and I just don't feel like I can worship. If you've said that or you're thinking that, then you don't understand what worship is. What you're telling me is that worship is perfection and you haven't reached that yet. But God is not looking for that. What he's looking is in spite of how you feel, he's looking for you to give everything to him. Why do you think it's called a sacrifice? Because we lay it all down. Worship isn't about bringing your perfection. It's about bringing all of yourself, the brokenness, the mess, the doubts, the weaknesses. And in all humility, you say, in spite of this, Lord, I offer myself to you. That's worship in every moment of your life. I offer you a sacrifice of praise, even though it hurts sometimes, even though it costs me, even though I don't feel like it. You are the same yesterday, today, and forever, and you deserve it. And by the way, I need it. Because it's in that place when you offer all of yourself and you say, I'm all in, that he says, you know what? I'm going to pour my grace upon you right now because I pour my grace upon you. And he comes and says, thank you for opening your heart to me. I'm going to heal you up. Thank you for offering your brokenness because I'm going to heal you. Thank you for offering me your doubts because I'm going to come and give you the assurance of faith that is sealed by the Holy Spirit. Thank you for your weakness because I'm going to make you strong by my Spirit. You see, we think we're giving him everything in worship, and while we give all of ourselves, he gives us way more back. While we pour ourselves out to him, he pours all of himself unto us to the degree that we can contain it. You see, there's a divine exchange that happens in worship. There is a spiritual dynamic in worship. He doesn't want us polished. He wants us to be present. How I am grateful for that fact. He doesn't want us polished. He wants us present. You know, I was reminded of I've probably shared this story before. I'm going to embarrass myself saying it, but hey, I'll do it. Many years ago, I would say probably 25 years ago, I was at a particular church at the time, and I rather think that sometimes I've got not a bad voice, I like to bust out the harmonies now and again. And I was in the church pew somewhere, and I had invited my friend, and he had quite a good voice as well, and I thought, this is great, we're going to riff on some harmonies. Honestly, it's a pastor of yours. Anyway, and behind me was someone, and they were trying to do harmonies as well, but I'm not sure it really landed well, those harmonies. I'm being kind. And I spent the whole of the first 10 minutes complaining to God. My friend's here, and he probably thinks, trying to sing a third above, and I can't because they're singing a fourth, and that doesn't even work anyway. And honestly, in that, I think God was just letting me get it off my chest. And then he said to me, yes, Mark, but their heart is where yours isn't. I was like, fair enough. Boy, I did some repenting right there. But I have never forgotten that. Because in that one moment, God conveyed to me the heart of worship, which is our hearts. Yes, songs are an expression of our worship, but that isn't just worship. You can sing the songs, and it's not worship. I remember once I was in the Edinburgh Festival, in the Edinburgh Fringe, actually, and I was playing with a jazz band from the US. This was back in 95, I think, 96. And we were an evangelistic group, and we had a mime group with us. It was great. And we would do stuff on the streets during the day, and then in the evening we would be on Carruthers Street with the church that was there, that's still there today, actually. We would do performances. And during the day, we'd have team times as well. And I remember that the leader of the group said, you know, you need to understand that Christians don't speak lies, they sing them. Excuse me? This is our leader? How can he say this kind of stuff? He said, you need to understand that so many times we sing songs and we don't even know what we're singing, the words. And when we do, and we recognize them, we don't even believe. And sometimes when we sing words like, I want to give you everything, we're lying. Because we don't really want to give everything. And I've never really forgotten that. And oftentimes when I'm singing songs or singing a new song unto the Lord, I feel challenged. The Spirit of the God says, are you sure, Mark? Are you sure? Because I'm not quite sure your life really represents what you're singing right now. I'd like us to stand as I end.